How is it going, boys? You may not know exactly what is going on in the background, but that really doesn't matter. All that matters is what I am saying right now, because I want to discuss the upcoming Legends GM mode. Now, this is your guys' opportunity to pick the players that will be using it. I have 2 to 3 options for every team. Most teams have 2, only a couple have 3 options. There's a couple things in there that I really want to talk about. So, getting this started, Anaheim, first off, you have 2 legends to pick from. Teemu Selanne, an absolute beast. He did play for Winnipeg for a little bit, but I decided not to count that for the current Jets, just because they weren't there before. They were at Atlanta previously, whatever. So you got Teemu Selanne or Paul Kariya. Now, taking a look at the roster, you can decide what they need or whatever. Going to Arizona. Now, this is where it starts to get a little different. You see Jack Eichel there. Don't worry, the rosters will be reset. That is from the scenario this morning. If I can show you Shane Doan here. He is one of the Legends options. Now, I know he's already on the team right now, but this is how it would go, and this goes for the couple players that are on here that are also like this. It's the same situation. What would happen is I remove current day player, in this case Shane Doan, from the team. I remove him completely from the game. I throw him in the Euro Leagues or something like that, just so nobody can ever take him. And then I take the player's best year from that team and put him on that team. So Arizona, I could have Shane Doan in his prime, and if I want to show you his stats right here, I would probably make him equal to his best year with 78 points here in 2007, 2008. That's probably the Shane Doan that I would mimic, and he would be the one that replaces current day Shane Doan, if that makes any sense. Now, you have another option to choose from. Instead of just replacing Shane Doan, you have the option of Dale Hawerchuk with the Arizona Coyotes. Going on to Boston here. With this roster is very talented, and you can add Bobby Orr, one of the greatest defensemen of all time, or you can add in hero goalie from 2011, I believe, in Tim Thomas. Heading over to Buffalo, you have the option between Gilbert Perreault and one of the greatest goalies of all time in Dominik Hasek. Going over to Calgary, and this is where the situation runs in again. I know he's not on Calgary, but you have the option of legend Jarome Iginla. I know he's on Colorado, but that would kind of screw Colorado over if you pick him. It's all fair game, though. So if you pick Jarome Iginla, he gets removed from Colorado, and I pick his best year and put it on Calgary. But instead of Jarome Iginla, you also have the option of Lanny McDonald. I know he didn't spend his entire career with Calgary, but he spent some really good years, and he did guide you guys to a cup in his final NHL season. Going on to the Carolina Hurricanes, we have Rod Brind'Amour, absolute defensive beast, and Ron Francis, a very good defenseman. Going over to Chicago, and I believe this would make their team absolutely stacked, you have the options of Bobby Hall and Stan Mikita. Going on to the Colorado Avalanche, Joe Sakic or Patrick Waugh. The Columbus Blue Jackets, and you have another interesting situation here. Rick Nash is the first option. He would have to be removed from the Rangers, but I could put him on the Columbus Blue Jackets with his best year ever with Columbus. Or you have the option for Rostislav Klesla. Now, Columbus had very few legend players. I thought about doing Marian Gaborik, but I already had a current day player in Rick Nash, so I couldn't do another player like that. So I chose Klesla, who spent several years with the team and was a pretty good defenseman for them. The Dallas Stars. I included the Minnesota North Stars in here and did not include them with the Minnesota Wild. So these are the players you have to choose from. Mike Modano and Joe Nieuwendyk. The Detroit Red Wings, my favorite team. Steve Yzerman or you have the option for one of the greatest defensemen of all time in Nick Lidstrom. Edmonton Oilers, the greatest player of all time in Wayne Gretzky, or a little surprise here because we have not had a goalie yet, I don't believe. Actually, you know what? Yes, we have. We've had a couple of them. But anyway, they have the option for a goalie in Grant Fuhr, who was the goalie during their dynasty days. Florida Panthers, you have the option for Pavel Bure or Olli Jokinen. I believe Jokinen is still in the game, so what I've said before with current players applies to Olli Jokinen as well. The Los Angeles Kings, you have the option between Hall of Famer Luc Robitaille and Marcel Dion. Going to Minnesota, this one is a little interesting because Mikko Koivu is like one of the best players on the team already, but you have the option to have him as in his legend version, or an interesting one here in Derek Boogaard. I decided to include him just because he spent 5 years of his career, 5 of his 6 years in the NHL with him, and he was an absolute fan favorite in Minnesota. He was one of the greatest fighters of the current day era before like the 80s. So I decided to include him, and if I did include him, he would be an enforcer, but I would give him a little bit of offensive prowess, so keep that in mind. Going on to Montreal, the greatest franchise of all time, going by Stanley Cups at least. I gave you guys the option of 3 legends, and this is up to you guys. Because Montreal is so great of a franchise, I was thinking about giving them 2 legends, just because they are so good, but that is entirely up to you guys. But their options are Henry Richard, Maurice Richard, or Guy Lafleur. Now the Nashville Predators. This one is a little interesting because one of the guys did not spend that much time with them. In fact, he only played about 16 games. That's Peter Forsberg. The reason why I picked him is just because, well, one, Philip Forsberg plays with him. I think that'd be a nice addition to the team, 2 Forsbergs. And he was just so talented throughout his career. I believe he was the best forward that has ever played with Nashville, even if he was hurt most of the season that he played with them. Now the other option is David Legwand. He is the career leader in points, assists, goals, you name it, he leads it. Now going over to New Jersey, Martin Brodeur is your first option, and your second one is Scott Stevens. New York Islanders, here we go. Mike Bossy or Brian Trottier. Those are your options. And for the New York Rangers, Mark Messier or Rod Gilbert. The Ottawa Senators, Daniel Alfredsson or the All-Star himself, Danny Heatley. Philadelphia Flyers, you have the options of Ron Hextall or Eric Lindros. Pittsburgh, Mario Lemieux or Jaromir Jagr. Now, I would really prefer it if you guys did not pick Jagr. I had to include him here just because he was one of the greatest Pittsburgh Penguins of all time, but I'm really urging you guys to pick Lemieux and not Jagr just because he is a very big piece of Florida, and it would be a really bad thing to take him off of that team. Now the San Jose Sharks are in the most interesting situation I could find. They are the only team that has like the 3 greatest players that have ever played with them still on their roster. There's Patrick Marleau, Joe Thornton, and Joe Pavelski. Now, I gave you guys the options of just 2 of these guys, in Patrick Marleau or Joe Thornton. And that would make them, like I said, I actually haven't said this, all these legends will be 20 years old. So that would give you the option of making one of those guys 20 years old and the best player he ever was. Or Jonathan Cheechoo. I know he was not that great for San Jose, but he did put up a couple 50-goal seasons, so I had to throw him in there. So your options are Patrick Marleau, Joe Thornton, and Jonathan Cheechoo. St. Louis, you have the options for the hardest shot ever in Al McInnes and Brett Hall. Tampa Bay Lightning, Marty St. Louis, and I know he's still a current day player, but Vinny Lecavalier. You could have him back in his prime on the team. Moving on to Toronto, Mats Sundin, or one of the greatest defensemen of all time in Borge Selming. Vancouver Canucks, this is an interesting one too. I gave you the option between Marcus Naslund or both the Sedin twins. This was one of the few teams that I was willing to make an exception for, the other one being Montreal with the two legends. The Sedin twins go hand in hand with each other. You can't have one without the other. They are the two greatest Vancouver Canucks of all time, in my opinion. So you have the option of getting both of those guys in a legend, and you see Henrik Sedin up at the top there and Daniel Sedin here. You have the option to have those two guys as legends. Going over to Washington, you have Alexander Semin as your first option and Peter Bondra as your second. The reason why I included Semin is because he did have some really good years in Washington, and he was one of the few guys that I think would really fit on this team. So Alexander Semin is your first option, and Peter Bondra is the second. Now for Winnipeg, this one was the most interesting because neither of these players ever played for Winnipeg. Ilya Kovalchuk or Viktor Kozlov. Alright, now if you need to hear any of these options again, just go back through everything I said, and I want to lay down a couple rules, even though I kind of touched on this a little bit. Every legend that I make will be 20 years old, with their birthday being January 1st. They will all age on the same day. So yeah, the age and actually the potential too. I want to touch on this. If they are actually, no, I think I'm just going to make them all franchise potential. I think that because these are all franchise guys, so everybody here will get franchise potential. And in touching on this a little bit more, they will all be signed to 3-year contracts, all $0.950 million, so $950,000 dollars they will be paid. So they're really not affecting the salary cap too much until that is over. And their stats will be under my discretion. I will decide on what they are. But before we start anything, I will go through every single player and confirm them with you guys. So whatever I decide them to be, you guys will check for me and decide if Kovalchuk should have 95 hands or 90 hands or something like that. Or if Teemu Selanne should have 90 speed or 85 speed. They probably won't be that big of changes, but just little things like that. So yeah, you guys are going to have a big say in everything that happens and leads up to this GM mode, and even going through and managing the team that I pick, which I have yet to say or even decide on. So yeah, let me know what legends you guys decide. I know this is a lot to choose from. If you want me to write out a list in the comments, I can do that. So yeah, that'll be all for now then. Please make your decisions down in the comments. I know it's a lot to choose from, but if you could really make the decision, it would help me out. If not, I will just be picking what players I want, and I really want you guys to have a say. So thank you for your input, and I hope you guys make some good decisions, because this list is full of great players. There's so many players to choose from, so thank you for all of that. And I will see you next time once I have all these players created, which should take quite a while. Thank you for your help. I'll see you next time.